Welcome. I'm Adam Miller, a consultant with the Art of Applying and a graduate of the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Today we've got a question from our Q&A vault about the timeline of when you can expect to hear back from schools, specifically consortium schools. So let's take a look at what our client asked our consultants. The person writes in, for those of us who applied through the consortium in round one, when should we hear back about interviews if we are invited? So as a member of the consortium myself, I remember this process very well. It's burned into my memory. So many days just checking to see when I'd gotten an email and don't recommend this, but looking at different online forums to see when other people had heard back. But the schools do lay all of this out pretty well on their websites. So try to be patient. Our consultant who responds says, hey, looks like the interviews and admissions decisions are all based on each individual school's timeline. Some of the info from the consortium website says, once your application has been submitted, the consortium staff will ensure that it is complete. And if it's not complete, then we'll be notified via email of the missing parts. If it is complete, then the consortium will forward the application to the schools that you ranked, right? The up to six schools that you applied to through the consortium. And the schools will then process the application according to their procedures. You'll then receive an admission decision from each school on their own timeline, and the consortium will notify applicants of membership and fellowship decisions during some point in March. The deadline kind of switches around every year when in March that happens. I'm glad that you already have heard back from some of your schools. I would refer you to your individual school's website if there's a particular school that you have not heard from yet. So just a little bit more commentary on what's going on here, which is this person is applying through the consortium, which is a membership organization of about 20 of the top business schools who've come together to say that we care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so you get to apply to these schools, up to 6 of them for the price of one, you get access to some scholarships, access to companies early, and there's really no downside other than you have to write an additional essay as well as get a third letter of recommendation to business schools about your commitment to the mission of the consortium. And so the one thing I want to add here is that the timeline is a tiny bit confusing with the consortium. For round one, like this person, generally you actually have a little bit more time than the typical school's deadlines. So I remember in my case, most of the schools I was applying to, because I also looked at it round one, they asked me to submit, if I was just going through the regular process, sometime in like September. But then the consortium deadline supersedes that, and it was in the middle of October. So that gave me more time to get all my materials together. And then on the back end of that for me, I heard about getting my interview invitations a little bit later than I saw other folks on some of these forums, as well as a few friends who are also applying to business school. And so because they have to do these in batches, the schools probably just received my application later than other folks because they just want to get to people as quickly as possible to start scheduling those. And what that meant was just that I was still interviewing in December when most people are typically done before Thanksgiving. But in terms of when I actually heard about getting into the schools, that was still the same day as everyone else. So I'll remember December 12th very well of 2018. Was it 2018? Maybe it was 2017. I just remember it was December 12th I got the phone call from admissions that I got in. And it must have been 2017. I was so excited. I couldn't believe it had actually happened. And then the following day, I logged into the portal to see if I'd gotten a scholarship, which I was very lucky to receive one. But generally, you just want to rank the schools based on which ones you want to go to, not to try to change the scholarship part. That's not anything we recommend here. So I'll just leave it at that. In terms of round one. In terms of round two, the deadline is very similar to all the schools where it's early January. And once again, the schools are going to get the consortium applications just a tiny bit later than other folks because they've got to make sure that they've sent them off correctly, whereas the schools aren't just able to log into one seamless portal. At least at the time when I was applying a few years ago, it seemed like most consortium folks heard just a little bit later, a week or two after, about getting invited to interview. But those things happen on a rolling basis, and the technology is always getting better. So don't worry about whether or not you will hear back about decisions on a different timeline. Your interviews might be slightly different than all of your other friends. Don't think it's a no until you get a no. And then in terms of scholarships, you'll definitely know by the end of March, at least given their current way that the consortium is set up, whether or not you've gotten a consortium fellowship, which is their word for the scholarship. So that's it for today's video. Hopefully you found it informative and a little bit entertaining. If you want any help getting into your dream school, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at theartofapplying.com.